Masai, Masicho, Deneza, Tsekuza, Skyza. First of all, I just want to acknowledge the territory of Tsleil-Waututh people and the Coast Salish people and say thank you. As my introduction stated, I am the elected regional chief of the British Columbia Assembly First Nations, and I was elected in October of 2017. Prior to that, I was the tribal chief of the Carrie-Sakani Tribal Council, which my community, Tackle Lake First Nation, is a member of. And we're located about 1,100 kilometers north of here at the headwaters of what you know as the Fraser River, the Fraser River watershed, and we call it Claco. Claco, everything drains into the river. It's good to be here today. It sounds like a very technical session. As a former RPF, registered professional forester, I let that lapse, had my issues with forestry. Much of the technical work I did in forestry was very based on economics, and with the society itself, I had very conflicting issues with the profession. Realizing that my background as a Tackle Lake member, I'm also from the, I understand that there's a lot of wolf in here. I'm from a wolf clan. I'm Lakshjibu, and I hold the name Makshrim Teegee, means wolf with the white spot on the head. And my white spot is getting bigger and bigger as I continue on my political career, but nevertheless, going back to you know, my issues with being an RPF was that what about my perspective as an Indigenous person and the issues that many of my people have brought up in regards to forestry? And really, you could speak to many different extractive issues such as mining or dams or forestry. Forestry probably having the biggest footprint on the environment than any other industry out there. Even though it is a renewable industry, it does have an effect on siltation, it does have an effect on wildlife, it does have an effect on the detrimental effects of the ungulate population. Moose population has been in decline for many decades. It's well over less than half of what it used to be back in 2007. The declining salmonid species that we depend on. For my community, we depend on the early and the late Stewart runs, and those have been significantly declining for a number of decades. Whether it's with climate change or siltation, increased temperatures in water, and there's a cumulative effect on many of the species that we see out there that many First Nations utilize in regards to sustenance. In my work as well, I was doing a lot of advocacy to look at alternative energy. One of the things that we're looking at was the issue of the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline, as well as 6 liquefied natural gas pipelines. We did do a quasi environmental assessment on the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline, which was an Aboriginal interest and use study. It concluded our people didn't want the project. Conversely, we did an EA on 3 LNG projects at once, and that was Pacific, or it was Prince Rupert Gas Transmission, Coastal Gas Link, and another very northern liquefied natural gas pipeline. And in our experience of looking at those projects, we concluded that there are many issues that those projects had in regards to not only the linear development of the pipeline, but what about the other issues, the issues that in regards to climate change, the tanker traffic, and where the gas is coming out in the northeast. And our people wanted more knowledge, and our people said, well, we can't support this project as it is. And not only that, the 6 months, the 180 days to review the project wasn't enough time, nor did we have enough resources and funding to look at the project. But we still had well over 200 issues that were never addressed, and the Liberal provincial government saw it fit to award the certificate to move ahead anyway. So we had to take it to court. So we had to do what we had to do. Those court proceedings were withdrawn because there was further discussions in regards to looking at cumulative effects and also looking at different issues. So we ended up coming to an agreement. It was called the Collaboration Agreement with the Carrie-Sakani Tribal Council. And these were agreements we're going to go into different agreements looking at forestry, mining, cumulative effects, and whatnot. I think, what our people were saying too is that we just can't look at these projects just in silos, that it's just going to have an effect within the spatial area of where these projects are going to be developed. Because climate change and the issues of climate change knows no borders. All these issues, they're affecting not only Coast Salish people down here, but my people in the Carrie-Sakani area, and also into the Coast Salish people in the United States. And as Iggy mentioned, the issues of siltation and all the changing issues that they're experiencing. We're also experiencing up in the territory I'm from as well. And we've seen it for a number of years, with the issues of the mountain pine beetle. And that was just exacerbated by climate change. We're seeing one more week of summer, and that has an effect on how pests such as mountain pine beetle affect the trees. And there's the issue of the spruce beetle. There's the issue of the Douglas fir beetle. So many of these issues that are coming up with pests are directly correlated with climate change. One of the initiatives that I was part of it's been about 9 years ago. I went to the Climate Change Summit, Conference of the Parties in Copenhagen. And Copenhagen was supposed to be the big meeting where we're going to see some major decisions and some major policy changes. And that didn't happen. But what I did understand and what I did experience at that conference for 2 weeks was to really get the perspective from the many Indigenous peoples across the world. And as I entered the conference, there was a big march, and there was these young people marching for the country of Tuvalu. And Tuvalu is a small island, and they're losing massive amounts of land every year as the oceans rise. And in 50 years, they could be a country with no land because of climate change. So there was a big call out for the many bigger states to do something about climate change back then, and that was 9 years ago. And the many stories about the Arctic people and all the presentations talking about what's changing. They're seeing all the changes with the migrations and with the caribou, and also the declining populations of the keystone species such as the polar bear. So all these issues that were brought up 9 years ago is, in my determination, it's probably getting worse. It is probably worse right now today. So what do we do about it? What do the Indigenous peoples who are mainly the first ones that feel the effects of climate change. What do you do? So we need policy, we need resources, and we need to become more resilient and really adapt to these changes that we're seeing today, almost on a yearly basis now, on a weekly basis. And we're seeing storms that are more intense. We're seeing, acidification of the oceans. For me, it was acidification of the soils. You could grow conifer trees here. There's high acidity. You could do something about it. But what do you do about it in the vast areas of the ocean? So I really commend the Tsleil-Waututh people for putting this on, these meetings. We need more of these types of meetings, perhaps a bigger one, to discuss climate change policy. And I certainly hope that Minister Heyman, who was here this morning, and I have many discussions with him in regards to the environment, is committed to making policies that really reflect what we're seeing from the technical, from all the technical people, and how that translates to policy, and how traditional knowledge is acknowledged in terms of gaining the same weight as Western science and traditional knowledge and what we do. I know back in my territory, we have our oral history, and many of our elders talked about, the vast forests were like were red. It was like the blood, and what they were talking about was that in the cycle of life of the forest, that these trees die, and there's the red attack of the pine beetles, and that was experienced well over 100 years ago, once before, and the fires took it. And that's what we're impeding, the cycle of life here in terms of forestry. So what do we do about that? So there's a lot of things to consider. Human population is ever increasing. And we're climate emitting meat bags. So we have a huge effect on the climate as population increases. And I got that from somebody at the conference, climate emitting meat bags. So so I just want to say thank you to Tsleil-Waututh for showing leadership, and I want to acknowledge the George family, the Leonard George. I've known him since I was 18, and when he passed away, it was to my family up north, had a big effect on us, because he was a really good friend, and I think that's where you get that seed of the idea of politics. Because when I was 18, I didn't want to be, I wasn't looking forward to becoming the chief of something or the regional chief, but listening to people like Leonard, you get a good idea of the perspective that Tsleil-Waututh and the Coast Salish. So it really gives you, at least as an Indigenous person, some confidence and some direction and on how to be a leader. So in many respects, he was, whether I knew it or not, he was mentoring me, I guess. But and knowing that he was the son of the great Chief Dan George, who was, we all know what a great speaker he was, and Leonard too. He was a great speaker in his own right, and so I certainly appreciate the Tsleil-Waututh and the George family and the many Coast Salish people here today, and showing leadership in regards to, and I'm certain that if Leonard was here today, he would be speaking about, showing leadership, showing the way to do something about this huge issue that is climate change. So masi, so desni, snechalia, thank you, masicho.